Hey everybody, what's happening? I'm Steven.
And I'm Spencer.
Today we want to bring you a presentation regarding alcohol. We know that as you go through school, you might hear a lot of things, you might have opportunities. And what we want to do is give you as much information as possible to help you realize the impacts that alcohol could have on your body. And first and foremost, we want you to know that nobody here at Nexus condones the illegal use of alcohol.
So let's start off by a quote that we hear a lot from people is, "I only had one drink," right? You hear that from people. It's a very common thing that people tell police officers when they get pulled over under suspicion of drunk driving. Officer, I only had one. And you might hear us talk throughout this presentation today about, what one drink is. So let's go ahead and define that. So one drink is the equivalent of 12 ounces of beer, 8 to 9 ounces of malt liquor, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of what's called hard liquor, or 80 proof spirits. So all of these things, even though they have a different volume amount, they contain the same amount of pure liquor, pure alcohol.
Absolutely. And so when it comes to this, we know that people have different styles or behaviors of drinking. So we want to cover a couple of those because we think they're extremely important. The first one that we want to cover is abstinence. And this is about 30% of American adults who do not drink at all. And the reason they might not drink is because of their religion, because of alcoholism, or an allergy, and even family history. So if you know somebody that doesn't drink because one of those things, make sure that you sympathize with them because that is really important to them, and we don't want to put any peer pressure onto somebody and try and force them into doing something that they wouldn't want to do or it's against what they believe in. The second one will be ritual drinking. And this is the drinking of alcohol in the context of a religious service or a family rite. It could be church, it could be communion or Sabbath. It could also be a wedding toast or even a bar mitzvah. So it's something that's not very common. It's usually kind of like a special event or something like that. Then the next one would be social. And this is probably the more normal one that we see those in high school and college and even into your young adulthood. Is more of a social setting, a social drinking. And that's just basically defined as people who drink in a social setting in very moderate quantities. Then we're going to talk about compulsive or problem drinking. This is when we typically think of alcoholics or people that drink too much or whatever it might be. This is when alcohol is used in a way to kind of cope with those problems. And it kind of might be perceived that way, that it's alcoholism, and that may not be the case. But it is somebody that could use alcohol to cope with the problems or negative feelings that they have. It often involves drinking too much, too often, which is obviously problematic. And this type of drinking is destructive and just frequently increases a person's problems rather than decreasing them. I think one thing that's important is we realize that alcohol is kind of a depressant.
Oh yeah.
Might make you feel good in the moment, but ultimately it's going to kind of hinder things. And then
that's very important to remember. I think people too often talk about how they need to go have a drink to make themselves feel better. Mm-hmm. But because of the depressant, it's just going to it's going to worsen your mood, not make it better.
Absolutely. And if you look at the picture of the guy closest to Spencer, he kind of looks a little bit in despair and some frustration. And so it's really important that we understand that. Like, the alcohol has a lot of negative effects on your body. It might make you feel good temporarily or seem that way, when in reality that's not the case. And then the last one that we're going to talk about is binge drinking. And this is the consumption of an excessive amount of alcohol in a short period of time. So typically, we've heard of stories where someone shows up late somewhere, or they show up to a party and they're in college or whatever it might be, and they're like, they got to catch up. They got to make sure that, they showed up late and all their friends have been there for a while, so they want to make sure that they match what everybody's doing. It's extremely dangerous, and so that is binge drinking. There are situations where that doesn't happen in a social setting. That's very different. But binge drinking is, as I said, an excessive amount of alcohol in a short period of time.
So I'm going to go through and just talk about some of the things that alcohol can do to your body when used excessively over long periods of time. So first one is alcohol cause your liver to develop cirrhosis, swelling, cancer, and even result in liver failure. Now we know that's a bad thing. Obviously, if you guys don't know yet, the liver is your organ in your body that processes toxins. And so if it doesn't work properly or it starts to fail, your body won't process toxins, which essentially means you get poisoned from the inside out. Every year, about 4,300 youth die due to excessive underage drinking. That's a huge number that we would really like to decrease, because that's a very scary number. There's a lot of young people to be losing due to the fact that they're just excessively drinking when they're underage. Youth that start drinking before the age of 15 are 6 times more likely to develop dependency than those who start at or after the age of 21, which obviously you know is the legal drinking age. So just waiting until you're of that legal drinking age decreases your chances of becoming dependent on alcohol by a vast amount.
And real quickly, Spence, not to interrupt you, but when it says develop dependency, what is another word that we might use for that?
Addiction. So typically, or alcoholism.
Okay.
You know, so typically what you do with addiction, it first manifests itself as a dependency on that substance. So it could be alcohol, it could be nicotine, it could be drugs, whatever it may be. Your body and your brain become dependent on it, and then that moves into the addiction where it seemingly can't live without it. Each day in the United States, about 13,000 youth take their first drink of alcohol. Again, a very large number that we would like to get decreased. As we know, alcohol can lead to excessive thirst, mood changes, loss of balance, blackout, coma, and death, and also risky decision making. All of those are very scary. Obviously, death is the worst one there. Having, drinking to the point of dying, alcohol poisoning, is very scary, and it's very common in high school and college parties alike because a lot of young people just don't know the limits and they don't know what alcohol can do to your system if you consumed in massive quantities very quickly.
Absolutely, and the impact it could have on a small community is huge.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
And so this presentation, it means something to me because in 2016 on Christmas morning, I got a knock on my door. And this knock came from my dad. It was about 5:30 in the morning, and when I answered the door, my dad looked at me and said, "Son, your sister's been in a car accident. They don't know that she's going to make it." And so with hearing those words, my mind kind of went into a panic, went into a bit of chaos, knowing that my son was there, who was about 8 or 9 at the time, and just how that was going to mess with Christmas morning and all the things. But most importantly, the concern was, is my sister going to survive? So what I wanted to show you is this quick little depiction that I made that is not very good. We made this on PowerPoint, so just forgive this. I'm not one of those graphic designers. This was done here at my office. And so Christmas morning at 1:22 in the morning, she was driving from in town as she was heading home. And so as she was heading home, there was a car that was coming from behind them. And the car was coming at a high rate of speed, and so my sister and her friend were actually in this front vehicle. And as this car, the driver of the second vehicle is the green one closest to Spencer, as he's coming up at this high rate of speed, they decide to do the responsible thing and merge over. So they begin to merge over into the slow lane. Well, as they did that, he continued to go at a high rate of speed, and he bumped into the rear end of their car, which subsequently sent them into a spin. They hit the side of the road, and my sister's car started flipping. They estimate the car flipped anywhere between 6 and 8 times. My sister was ejected from the vehicle. That's why you see the picture of the little stick figure up there. That symbolizes my sister. In this distance right here, from the road to the railroad tracks, which they found my sister on the other side of the railroad tracks, it's approximately 150 feet. So they estimate that she flew anywhere from 150 feet to 200 feet in the air because of this guy hitting them in their vehicle. So the young man that hit them, his blood alcohol content was 0.24. In the state of California, it is 0.08 is the legal limit for that. So he was over almost 3 times the legal limit for that. And so he hit them doing an absurd amount of speed. He had a spare tire on his car, on the front side of his car. He hit my sister doing 124 miles an hour is what he rear-ended them at. So they spun, the car rolled, my sister was ejected, and she ended up over here. Luckily, there was a person that was coming by that called the 911 and had the emergency responders show up, and they knew that the driver of my sister's car was there, but they didn't know where my sister was. So they began a search, and then they decided that they were going to call Metaflight because there was somebody that was going to need that services, and that was my sister. So here is where the Metaflight would land. My sister at this point, by the time they get there, my sister had been unconscious for over 30 minutes. just laying there in the middle of a field on Christmas morning. So they get her there. She basically has a really low heart rate, not getting much response, if any, from her. They get her to the hospital and they try and do everything they can to keep her alive. So my sister, when she got to the hospital, had an extreme amount of broken bones. She broke her ankle, she broke her shin, she tore her ACL and her MCL. Those of you that have had those injuries, you know how much of a pain in the neck those can be to rehab. One of the things I try and tell people when we're in class is you have your knee and there's the ligament that holds the two of those. Well, when they snap, they typically tear the ligament in the middle. There was so much force when she was yanked out of the car that the ligament didn't snap. It actually removed the bone from one side of the knee, which is an extreme amount of force to do. So basically when they went back to try and repair it, what they did was they put it like a puzzle piece, matched it, put a screw in there, and she was able to rehab and do things that way. So she broke her ankle, she broke her shin, tore the ACL and the MCL, she broke her clavicle, she broke her collarbone, she broke her arm, she broke some wrists, she fractured 16 vertebrae in her back, she broke her pelvis as well, dislocated a couple fingers, and then she ultimately had a traumatic brain injury, which has resulted in her having been in a coma for a month and a half. And so when I got there, Christmas morning, I made some phone calls to talk to the nurse and see if I could hear what her status was. We lived in Jackson and my sister was up in Reno. This is the hospital that she was at. So I'm calling, can I just get an update? Can I get an update? Well, they wouldn't give me an update because they could not confirm who I was. And I was next of kin for my sister. So that basically means our parents were gone. And so I was the one that was able to find out the information, but I had to be there and prove to them I was who I said I was. So I drove 3 hours on Christmas morning with my wife to the hospital to get there and basically tell them she's got a 10% chance max at living. And the reality is, the only reason that she's got a chance is because she's young. They don't know too much about what happened, which we obviously later found out, all the details of the accident. But the doctor said if her brain continues to swell, we might have to remove part of her skull. And if that doesn't help, we don't know. So the next 48 hours are going to be really, really important. So all that to tell you that some young man decided on Christmas Eve, the eve of Christmas, and Christmas morning to drive illegally
3 times the limit.
3 times the limit at 124 miles an hour and hit my sister and change her and her friend's life for the rest of their life. Now, we are thankful that my sister is still here.
Also, Steve, not to interrupt you, but he didn't just change Stephen's sister's life and her friend, changed his own life, and the 3 families too. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, you guys dealt with a lot of stuff, going through all her surgeries, just the stress of it, Her life is forever changed. His life is forever changed. He's going to spend 20 to 25 years in jail, for a stupid decision he made. Not that I, condone that at all or feel bad for him, but at the same time, he made a bad decision and his life is essentially forfeit now.
Absolutely. And so basically what the law is in Nevada is after somebody has received X amount of dollars of medical bills because of something, it's considered a felony, or basically as you've killed somebody. So he is spending 20 years in prison. I think he was 22 when it happened. So he's going to spend the majority of his life in prison based on this one night and one bad decision. So I don't tell you this to get sympathy or anything like that. We tell you because my sister was only, she was 19 years old. She just turned 20, excuse me. And so she just turned 20, she was going to college, she was working, she has all these aspirations. And somebody derailed her life. And as Spencer mentioned, it affected me, it affected my wife and our family and the rest of my sister's family. And everybody surrounded that guy and the other person that was in my sister's car. So it was a very traumatic event. And the reality is, we up here in this community have lost a number of people from drinking and driving at a young age. And so we would implore you to make good decisions, make healthy decisions that we know in high school things happen. So if you're getting yourself in a situation, we want you to know that your parents or your guardian, they would much rather receive a call from you and say, hey, I'm here and I've made a mistake, will you come and get me? versus your parents getting that knock on the door like I did Christmas morning.
Yeah.
Because it's awful. It's an awful feeling, and that wasn't even my son, that was my sister. So we would encourage you to make sure maybe you have a list or a couple people you could write down if you might get into a situation that you can just call those people and they will come and get you, and you can have that conversation later. It's super important that you have those people that you would trust, because obviously you don't want to have to be in a situation like my sister, who's now had upwards of 20 surgeries to try and get back to normal. She's going to be disabled for the rest of her life because of this night, but she's making the best of it. She's doing the things that she needs to do, and we don't want that to happen to you. We would actually implore you to find somebody, and if worst case scenario, if you couldn't find somebody, I'll put my phone number at the bottom of this video at the end that you can make sure that you can reach out to us, and we'll get you home safe.
Definitely. And thanks for sharing that story, Stephen.
Yeah, man.
So moving on here, guys. There's a study done in 2015 that said showed 33% of high school students who had been surveyed reported drinking in the last 30 days. And of that 33%, 90% of them have reported binge drinking. We talked about binge drinking earlier. Very common on college campuses, very common at high school parties as well. Part of the reason because of that is young people who don't know their limits. Yeah. So they think, or they show up late to the party, whatever it may be, and they think, oh, I gotta put a bunch down and do all this to catch up. It's a really bad idea, guys, and it almost always ends in your night ending badly. From possible alcohol poisoning to bad decision making to maybe get behind the wheel of a car making one of those mistakes. Yeah. And 1 in 5 of them had also reported getting in a car with a driver who had been drinking. And as Stephen just said, it's very unsafe. If you find yourself in that situation, please make a phone call. Find somebody that's sober that can get you right home so that you know you're safe.
Yeah, I would encourage you, if you've been drinking, don't get behind the wheel of a car. Don't go with your friend that's been drinking. We've got Uber, we've got Lyft, we've got all these sorts of things.
Taxis around here.
So just please don't do it.
Yeah, please. On average, underage drinkers tend to consume more alcohol at one time than do adult drinkers. Again, that just stems from not having enough knowledge about alcohol in order to make correct decisions. This number always kind of pops out to me. People ages 12 to 20 consume about 11% of all the alcohol drank in the United States every single year. That's a huge number when you think about all the alcohol drank in a country of almost 330 million people. 11% is drank by people who aren't even legal to drink. So that's another number we're trying to decrease. In 2013, there were approximately 119,000 emergency room visits, people ages 12 to 21 for injuries related to alcohol. This includes car crashes, possible, any kind of injury with alcohol related, just, again, risky decision making, whatever it may be, or alcohol poisoning, things like that. And 1 in 4 fatal teen car accidents involve underage drinking and driving. That's 25%, guys. Another massive number that we would really like to see decrease. We don't want to see young people getting hurt or dying because they're making bad decisions while using alcohol.
Yeah, we would like that number to be 0.
0 is, ideal.
And so when it comes to that, like we obviously know, Spencer and I both played sports in high school, that we want you to realize that if you're an athlete or you do really kind of any sort of thing, like it has an effect on your body, especially the athletes. If you do one night of drinking, that can erase 2 weeks of training. So think of practice, think of the weight room and all the things that you've been doing. 2 weeks of training gone for one night. That is absolutely crazy. I remember our practices, not something I would want to do. So I want to be as best as I can be.
For sure.
And then the use of alcohol as well as tobacco reduces the blood flow to the brain, which decreases your athletic performance, which is obviously super important. Your speed, agility, strength, and concentration are those performances that are affected. So you think of anything, whether it's on the football field or the baseball field or track or basketball court, whatever it might be, if you don't have and you're not moving at your best ability, there's going to be problems. You want to be the most capable to do the job at the highest level as possible, and if it's not, it's being affected, and alcohol can do that on your body, to your body, 54.8% of athletes who drink alcohol suffer from injury compared to 28.3% of those that do not. And so it's really important that you understand that you are putting your body at a significantly more increase of a risk if you're drinking versus those that don't. It's almost double.
Yeah, that's a big increase.
And as an athlete, one thing I think that we hate the most, not practice sometimes, but most of the time, being injured is awful. So
Some time.
you definitely can be injured more when it comes to this alcohol. Also, high school and college athletes lose between 15 and 30% of the overall performance when they drink alcohol. 15 to 30%. Think of all the time you've prepared in the video room, in the weight room, and at practice, and you're losing that sort of performance. That's a high number, you guys. We want you to understand that. We don't want that. We want you to, especially in our small community, there's a lot of people that love going to the high school games and seeing you guys perform and being the best that you can be. So we want you to perform the best you can. And if you're drinking alcohol, there's a good chance that you're not going to perform the best you can.
Yep. A little bit more about what alcohol can do to the athletic body. It can reduce your reaction time by up to 38%. This translates to how quickly you can block a shot, get off the line track, get off a starting block, swing a bat, for all you baseball and softball players out there. Yeah. Alcohol can also reduce your testosterone levels, which decreases, or translates to, over time, to a decrease in lean muscle mass, which, as we know, as an athlete, you need that lean muscle mass. Also can contribute to a shorter memory span and damage the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain where learning takes place, which, would kind of mess you up with remembering your plays, remembering what spot you're supposed to be on the field at what part of the game, things like that. So you don't want to do that. It also leads to insufficient rest. Alcohol causes sleep disruption, which is one of the most detrimental aspects to recovering athlete. As we all know, after you work out, after a hard day of practice, what you really need is you need a good meal and you need some sleep. Your muscles need that time. Your body needs that time to recover and repair itself from what you do it throughout the day. And if you're not sleeping correctly, you're not getting into what's called the REM cycle, which is that deep, natural sleep, and that's where the body gets its most recovery from. It can also lead to weight gain, and it also intervenes with the way blood processes the mineral zinc, and zinc is important for building endurance. So, and as we all know, as an athlete, you need endurance, whether it's soccer, football, basketball, track, baseball, softball. You need to be able to have that endurance to get through those sports on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And we want to talk about what happens when you get caught. Now, what happens? And what do we mean by getting caught, and where is this? Is this driving, or is this just in general? Minor in possession, you have misdemeanors. You can have a fine of $250 and up to 36 hours of community service. 1 year suspension of your license, which is extremely important for you guys. We know you want to get on the road and drive, so don't limit yourself by drinking or being in possession. Second offense, $500 fine, up to 48 hours of community service. You could be on probation and up to a year in juvenile hall. Driving under the influence, big no-no. We talked about that. Mandatory 1 year suspension of your license, fines of up to $10,000, DUI school, 5 years of probation, time in court, misdemeanor or felony. It goes on your record. Super damaging to what you might try to do later on in your life. Drunk in public, that's maybe you're out with friends and you're being too loud and disruptive, you can get in trouble. Misdemeanor, informal probation, possibly up to 6 months in jail and up to $1,000 in fines.
So, and also guys, one thing to remember with all these, like they say 1 year suspension of license, 1 year suspension of license, all that kind of stuff. It's important to remember, if you don't have your license, it's at the judge's discretion. He can say, all right, well, you're 15 years old, now you can't get your license till you're 18. Or you're 17 years old, now you can't get your license, I'm going to take your license till you're 21. That's all at the judge's discretion, guys. So it's important to remember that, and that's a big leap from, hey, just a year to now you can't get it for 4 or 5 years. Yeah. Like, that'd be pretty rough for some people.
Good point.
Some more consequences that could happen. The first one is fingerprints get stored in a federal database, which means it'll always come up that you have this on your record. And don't think, I'm going to kind of skip down here, guys, we're talking about records real quick. It says sealed records. Don't think that just because you had a record as a minor that those records can never come back up again. A judge can request those records to be unsealed at any point if they see a pattern of behavior. Another thing that could happen is you could get suspended or expelled from school. And this can happen even if the occurrence didn't happen on campus. Yeah. That's up to the school and the school district. Could be restrictions on your travel. Typically, if you get a DUI, they will take your passport. No working at daycares or summer camps, so if you have any kind of inclination that you want to work with young people, or you do some volunteer stuff at summer camps and daycares, things like that, that can go away if you have a history of alcohol problems or alcohol-related arrests. Potentially not being able to enlist in the military. Now, I have a friend who enlisted in the military at about 26 years old, which is pretty old to enlist for your first time, but he had to go through a lot of red tape and jump through a lot of hoops because he had gotten a DUI when he was, I think, 21, 22. He had gotten a DUI 4 or 5 years before that, and so it took him a long time to get through all that red tape afterwards. He was able to do it, but man, was it a lot of work. Difficulty getting into colleges. A lot of colleges are going to look at your arrest history, your criminal history, and see if you have a criminal record. And if you do, they may not want you representing their school. Your FAFSA denial, which is your federal student financial aid, and that's a lot of money you can get for free. FAFSA's free. There's no paying it back. But if you have a history or any kind of alcohol-related or drug-related arrest, they can deny you for that. Not being able to get a job in government if that's what you're looking for. I talked about sealed records already. Going to court and just being on probation, which isn't fun. You know, nobody likes their probation officer showing up at school all the time to talk to you or having to spend time in court. And then also, you know, you have to put this stuff on job applications, which is very difficult to do as well. You have to let any potential employer know that, hey, I had a drug-related or alcohol-related arrest in my past, whether it was a misdemeanor or a felony. You have to put both on any job application.
Absolutely. Guys, that's just a little video about alcohol. We hope you would take into consideration some of the things we've given you. Maybe the story might have impacted you and you know somebody that's been impacted by drinking and driving. Maybe it's been you. If you got any questions for us, please don't hesitate to call us. Our telephone number is 209-257-1980. Listen to Stephen Hartman's extension or Spencer Dushke's extension.
Yep.
We'd love to hear from you guys.
And as always, guys, stay healthy and stay safe.